Well, good afternoon. Gratefully acknowledging the presence and support of our Board Vice Chairman, Senator Westmoreland, as well as Dr. Bullard, Mrs. Brooks, Mrs. Richardson, and our teachers and staff. I welcome you to today's talk. Dr. Anthony Davies is Associate Professor of Economics at Duquesne University in Pittsburgh, the Milton Friedman Distinguished Fellow at the Foundation for Economic Education, and co-host of the podcast, Words and Numbers. He is the co-author of Cooperation and Coercion, has written a book on understanding statistics, and has written hundreds of op-eds for the Wall Street Journal and other publications. His YouTube videos on economics, government, and policy have garnered millions of views. Dr. Davies is also a dad. In a recent article in Public Discourse, he wrote, "Humans are, hands down, the single most fascinating set of creatures on the planet. If you want to understand how humans work, just make a few, sit back, and watch them do their thing." Dr. Davies is speaking today about two topics: things high school students should know about economics, and things high school students should know when choosing their college and major. Dr. Davies appears at Pinnacle Classical Academy under the auspices of our Classical Foundations program, whose mission is to provide students, faculty, and community leaders with a deeper understanding of local history, as well as the nation's founding principles and their application to modern life and society through historical and economic works that are part of the school's curriculum and through a series of academic events. Please join me in giving a warm welcome to Dr. Anthony Davies.
Hi, thank you for having me here. As you know, I'm a university professor. I go around the country talking to students at high schools, public schools, private schools, homeschool students. I probably do 100 to 150 of these a year. And of all the high schools I talk to, there are three that if I were to be fired tomorrow, I'd be calling up those three looking for a job. And one of them is here at Pinnacle Classical Academy. This is one of the most outstanding schools I have ever had the pleasure of speaking at. So I want to talk today about things you should know about economics. And let me start with what economics is and isn't. Economics is not about money and profit in the stock market. Economics is about human behavior. It's about how we act when you take a human who has unlimited desires, as we all do, and put that human in a situation where the human is facing limited abilities. And the question is, what do we do as these unlimited desires bump up against our limited abilities? And what emerges is a behavior that we come to call economics. At the core of this behavior, fundamental to everything we do as economic beings, is diversity. We have different abilities, we have different aspirations, different preferences, different expectations, different constraints. We live in different circumstances. Ultimately, each one of us is the perfect minority, a minority of one. Each of us is uniquely different from every other one of us on the planet. And economics emerges when each of us, in our different ways, interact with every one of the others of us. And we find ways to share, to become productive together. So you have skills that I don't, and I have skills that you don't. And so I come to rely on you for the things you do well, and you come to rely on me for the things I do well. And on one level, we create an economy. We buy and sell between each other. But that's kind of like the more mundane level. At some deeper level, we form a connection. We start to form a society, a community, based on this interaction of me relying on you and you relying on me. And we come to realize that we're members of a shared society. As members of a shared society, we humans have developed two tools to help facilitate what we do as a society. One of those tools we call markets. The other tool we call government. And broadly speaking, you think about markets as us cooperating. It's what we do together. Government, broadly speaking, is a tool of coercion. It's what we do to each other. Both of these tools serve important parts in our interaction as human beings. So I want to talk about markets a little bit. With markets, we find ways to fit together, like pieces in a puzzle. So you paint my house and I fix your car. You grow my food and I sew your clothes. You plan my retirement and I do your taxes. We fit together our needs and our abilities. And what we do is we specialize, we exchange. I spend my time figuring out how to do really well the things I'm good at doing, and you spend your time figuring out how to do really well the things that you're good at doing, and we exchange. That exchange is so complex that it can't be directed by coercion. There's no way that we can appoint people, no matter how smart, no matter how well-intentioned they are, to direct those interactions. Because those people, we think of them as government, no matter how smart, no matter how well-intentioned, simply don't have enough information to be able to make decisions for us that are better than the decisions we can make for each other. And so when we try and figure out how is it that I get the clothes that I make exchanged to you for the food that you grow, the tool we use is not government, the tool we use is markets, tools of cooperation. Now, one of the more interesting things that humans have developed to facilitate markets, and you can look back through human history, every single society has developed this tool independently, is money. Some of us use precious metals like gold and silver, some of us use rocks, some of us use paper, some of us use electronic bits, but every collection of humans has developed this tool of money. It's an invention and it solves problems. It solves actually two major problems. One is savings. So imagine if we had no money and I'm a college professor and you want to come to my university and study economics and we have not invented money. So what do? Well, your parents have a farm and you raise chickens. All right, you want to come, you want to get a 4-year degree in economics? I can help you out with that. It's going to cost you 20,000 chickens. Now what do? Well, your parents are hard workers. They're going to save up for college, so they start raising chickens. They grow, 100 chickens, 500 chickens over the course of a summer, and they put them to the side, right? They're in their barn doing their chicken thing. And the next year comes around, they grow even more chickens. They grow 2,000 chickens. They put them in the barn. They're putting them aside for your eventual education. They're doing their chicken thing. And year after year, it goes like this until you hit age 18 and you're ready to come to the university. The university requires 20,000 chickens. Yeah, well, what's happened over the course of those 18 years? Half the chickens are dead, right? The other half have eaten the ones that are, if you ever know anything about chickens, are gross things, right? They've eaten the other half. And what do you see here? This is a stupid way to save because the thing you produce, it rots, it degrades over time. And so we've invented money. And one of the things that money does is it gets around this savings problem. You can raise chickens and sell them to people who want them in exchange for cash. You put that cash under your mattress. And you raise some more chickens. You sell them to people who want chickens. You get some cash. You put that cash under your mattress. And you keep doing that year after year. And then eventually, by the time you reach age 18, your parents have saved up enough cash and they can pay for you to go to college. Money is a tool we've invented that solves that problem. It also solves another problem called the double incidence of wants, which sounds kind of complicated, but it's rather simple. And the double incidence of wants problem goes like this. I need food, and you're a farmer. I'm a painter. So let's trade. I'll paint your house, you give me food. We don't have money, so that's the way we have to do it. We have to trade. Yeah, well, here's the problem. What if you don't need your house painted? All right, now I've got a problem. What do? I've got to go find somebody who needs their house painted and who has the thing that your parents, the farmers, want. And I've got to set up this complicated exchange so that I can exchange, ultimately, my painting for your food. And if you think that sounds really complicated, money solves the problem, right? All I have to do is I paint houses, I get money. I want some food, I go to your parents, they grow food, I hand them the money, they give me the food. We actually have markets in this country that don't use money. And they are as complicated as the thing I just described of I'm painting a house, I gotta find somebody who needs their house painted and who has the object, whatever it is that your parents want in exchange for the food. So I paint their house and they give your parents this thing, your parents give me the food. We have markets like this. I have a friend right now who's in need of a kidney. We don't allow people to buy and sell kidneys in this country. It's against the law. But you can trade kidneys. The problem is that kidneys aren't interchangeable, right? So a kidney that I have that might work for you doesn't work for you. But the kidney that I have might work for you, and the kidney you have works for him, the kidney he has works for you. And so if I can find this chain of causality like this, I can donate my kidney to somebody who donates their kidney to somebody who donates the kidney to the person I want. You see how complicated that is? It's complicated because we aren't using this wonderful tool we invented called money. Now, there are downsides to using money, and we're experiencing a lot of the downsides right now. And the downside is that we can get to a point where our economy is so complicated that we forget what money is. Money is simply a tool that moves goods and services back and forth. It facilitates exchange. If you forget that, you start to make errors, like you point to Jeff Bezos, who has $200 billion. And you say, well, he's taken $200 billion from society. He has an obligation to give back. He's got $200 billion, and we don't have $200 billion. And we talk about inequality and all of this kind of thing, and the 1% and all of that. We've forgotten what money is. How did Jeff Bezos get $200 billion? Yes. You have to be really loud because I'm deaf. He created Amazon. More than that. Creating Amazon isn't what got him the $200 billion.
People decided they wanted to sell their stuff on Amazon, so people collected commission off.
Yeah, it's the interaction of the Amazon with the people. What happened was Amazon's services were so good that we liked them better than we like keeping our dollars in our pockets. And so when Amazon comes along and says, hey, I can deliver you this thing, here's a bottle of water. Amazon will deliver this to you overnight with a few clicks on your keyboard for pennies on the dollar that it would cost you, if you went to the store or whatever it is. So what do? You say, I like that. I'm going to buy it. And we all did that. We all started buying things. Imagine how horrible the lockdown would have been in the age of COVID if Amazon didn't exist. Jeff Bezos has $200 billion, not because he took it from the economy, but because we gave it to him. We freely handed him our $200 billion and said, please, take this. Give us your goods and services. We like the goods and services better than we like the dollars in the pocket. And once you start to realize that money is just a tool that we use to move goods and services, you look at somebody like Jeff Bezos who has $200 billion and you realize, wait a minute, that $200 billion is not something he has taken from the economy. Rather, it represents value he has provided to the economy that he hasn't asked for in return. I give you a simple example. You're baking a cake. You need a cup of sugar. You're out of sugar. You go to your neighbor's house. You say, hey, can I borrow a cup of sugar? And the neighbor says, sure, I'll give you a cup of sugar. And you say, I'm going to be fair here. I'm going to write you an IOU. I write an IOU. I hand it to you. It says, I owe you 1 cup of sugar. All right, so you take your cup of sugar, you go home, you bake your cake. A couple days go by, you want to bake another cake. You don't have any sugar. You go to your neighbor's house, you say, hey, can I borrow a cup of sugar? And the neighbor says, sure, I got a cup of sugar, I'll give it to you. And you say, okay, I'm going to write an IOU. Here's an IOU, I owe you another cup of sugar. I take a cup of sugar, I go home, I bake a cake. Now, step back and look at that for a moment. Who won and who lost so far in that transaction? You got 2 cups of sugar. What's your neighbor have? Your neighbor is out 2 cups of sugar. He has 2 IOUs. But no reasonable person would point to the neighbor and say, the neighbor needs to give back. He has more IOUs than you have. No. Where did he get those IOUs? He got the IOUs because he gave you something that you liked. And you said, here's an IOU, and when you want something from me, just hand me the IOU and I'll give you something back. In other words, the neighbor provided to you more goods and services than you provided to the neighbor. That's why the neighbor has the IOUs. And that's what money is. Money is simply an IOU that says, you have given me more than I have given you. So take these IOUs, and when you're ready for more stuff, hand them to me and I'll give you more stuff. So this misunderstanding of money, the primary tool we use in conducting our interactions as economic beings, leads us to these misunderstandings. One of the big misunderstandings we have in this country is one of inequality. And I want to preface these remarks by saying I'm not about to tell you that inequality doesn't exist. Of course it exists. I am about to tell you that it isn't as bad as what people think it is. Because when we talk about inequality in this country, we tend to focus on the dollars. We focus on the tool rather than what the tool is used for. We don't focus on the goods and services. I'll give you an example. A minimum wage worker today, and let's talk about basement, so like $7.25 an hour, not this $15 an hour business. $7.25 an hour worker in the United States, working full-time, will earn about $15,000 a year. $15,000 a year. How much does the median worker worldwide earn? And I'm going to talk about the world, so of course costs of living are different elsewhere than they are in the United States. So in the background, let's make an adjustment. So yes, I understand it's cheaper to live in Mexico than it is in the US. So make an adjustment for that difference in cost of living. And after you've made the adjustment, ask yourself, how much does the average person on planet Earth earn in a year? The answer is $12,000. A $7.25 an hour worker in the US working full-time makes $15,000. Quite literally, we have become so unbelievably rich that what we call poverty, the rest of the world calls middle class. This misunderstanding of what poverty is comes in part from our focus on the dollars. We look at $7.25 an hour, we look at $15 an hour. We don't look at the goods and services we have. You have in your pockets right now, if they allow you to have them in your pockets right now, cell phones. If you don't have them here, they're at home, they're somewhere. Most of you, in fact, I know by the numbers that something like 97% of you have cell phones. Those cell phones give you access to information that President Reagan did not have access to when he was president. You can get it for a couple $100 plus a monthly subscription to your cell phone service. In terms of goods and services, you have access to things that rich people did not have access to. Another example, Andrew Carnegie died with something on the order of $500 million in the bank. And if you adjust it for differences in the size of the economy then versus now, in today's terms, Andrew Carnegie would be worth something around $400 billion. In other words, in his day, Andrew Carnegie was worth twice what Jeff Bezos is worth today. Andrew Carnegie's mother died of tuberculosis. Despite his immense wealth, there's nothing he could do to help her. There was nothing he could do to save his mother. from dying of tuberculosis. Today, the poorest American can walk into a pharmacy and buy a pill that cures tuberculosis. The poorest American today has access to goods that Andrew Carnegie with $400 billion did not have access to. And we tend not to pay attention to that because why? We focus on the dollars. We keep saying these people have more dollars than these people, and we forget the goods and services that we have. I'll give you one more interesting statistic. The median wealth worldwide, so not income, but wealth, how much stuff do people have? Median wealth worldwide is $7,500. The median wealth in the US, $120,000. Again, that's adjusted for differences in cost of living. The average American has a wealth that's 16 times the wealth of the average human being. Do you know what coincidentally also has that 16-to-1 ratio? The average American versus the average 1%er. When we point to the 1% and we say, you've got all this money, you need to give back, and this is not fair, it's an inequality. And I can understand the argument. I don't want to belittle the argument. What I do want to do is put it in perspective. When we turn to the 1% and talk about how much they have relative to us, that is the same difference as us versus the rest of the world. The average American is richer than the average human being to the same extent that the average 1%er is richer than the average American. And so there's a moral story here. And the moral story, which kind of goes beyond the economics, but economics is about human behavior, and humans are moral beings, and it's worth talking about. The moral story here is, when we are rightly so, concerned with injustice of inequality, our first response should not be to look up to those who have more than us and say, this is not fair. Our first response should be to look down to those who have less and say, this is not fair. If our first reaction to inequality is to say, I'm being treated unfairly, rather than to reach into our pockets and help people who have less, then really we're not concerned about inequality. Really, we're concerned about envy. So I talk about markets, and markets are the tool we use when we cooperate. We come together and we do things voluntarily. Government is a tool we use when we coerce, when we get together and say, this is how you all are going to behave. And it turns out that both of these tools are necessary for a vibrant society, because markets thrive when people are secure in their lives, they're secure in their property. When you're secure in your life, you're secure in your property, you don't have to worry about someone coming along and burning your house down or stealing your kids. You don't have to worry about someone defrauding you because you're secure in your life and your property. And so, in being secure in your life and your property, you can make plans. You can say things like, okay, let's invest in some project over here that is going to earn us something in the future. And with that something in the future, I can make my life better for my family and my friends and this sort of thing. We can plan for the future. We can act toward the future as opposed to constantly being concerned about the present. And government is the tool we use. It has an important and indispensable role in ensuring that we're secure in our lives and secure in our property. But here's the thing. Have any of you ever used a chainsaw? I lived in West Virginia for many years. In West Virginia, I lived in the back country, and you had to always have a chainsaw in the back of your car, especially during the winter, because you're going along, a tree comes down, you got to hop out of your car and cut the thing up and get it off the road, and you can continue, right? So everybody's got a chainsaw. Chainsaws are marvelous tools. There is nothing that will do the work of a chainsaw, I mean, save for like a huge heavy piece of equipment. Chainsaws are indispensable. But here's the thing. If you get a birthday cake and it's time to cut it, For God's sake, don't reach for the chainsaw. It's an incredibly powerful tool, but it's designed for a specific purpose. And if you try and use it for purposes it wasn't designed for, you're just going to hurt people. At worst, at best, you're going to make a mess. That's what government is. Government is an incredibly powerful tool that has incredibly wonderful uses. But if you pick it up for every problem that comes along, at best, you're going to make a mess. At worst, you're going to hurt people. So the thing I like to say is government is not a magic wand. And we've come somehow to think of it like that. Every problem that comes along is somehow a problem for government. In fact, it's no longer even a problem for state or local government. It's a problem for federal government. So you run to Washington and say, we need a law to do the following things. Well, here's the thing. Government's not a magic wand. It can't magic into existence free college. It can't magic into existence free healthcare or free retirement. All it can do is force some people to provide things for others. So when our politicians talk about free healthcare or free college, they really don't mean free. What they mean is, let's force somebody over here to pay for this person. So healthcare is a little bit sticky because we all have understandable emotional reactions toward it. Let's back off a little bit and talk about college. Talk about free college. Programs for free college are not really making college free. What they're doing is forcing people who don't go to college to pay for those who do. Phrased that way, it doesn't seem all that fair anymore. But government can't magic college into existence. All it can do is force people who aren't going to pay for people who do. And herein lies a political conundrum, and that is politicians win elections by convincing voters that they can make their lives better. Elect me, I'll make your life better. Okay, that's fine, that's what politicians do. In fact, that's what we want them to do. We want them to make our lives better. But here's the problem. Particularly if I have a 10-second window on the evening news. In 10 seconds, I can easily promise you magic. It's much harder to easily describe to you how I might realistically deliver the things that you want. And so consequently, politicians who promise magic have a tendency to win elections. Politicians who are more realistic and say things like, no, that's not possible, they tend to lose elections. And what happens over time? Over time, you get a Congress that is largely, not entirely, but largely composed of politicians who have promised magic. And they have to keep on promising magic because they have to keep on getting elected. And then you get a voter base that somehow starts to believe in the magic. And if we just elect these people, they'll make all these wonderful things come true. Oh, and by the way, you voters over there that don't believe in this magic, you really just hate children. That's your problem. Because clearly, this magic over here would make children better off. And you see the problem that not only do we end up electing politicians who endorse magic, but somehow we pit ourselves against each other as if we don't all have the same goals. We do. It doesn't matter whether you're a Democrat or Republican or something in the middle. We all want our children to grow up in safer environments. We all want better education. We all want our elderly to be well cared for. We all want people to have access to health care. Everybody agrees on that. What we disagree on is the existence of magic. And the more we believe in the magic and the more we elect politicians on the basis of perceived magic, the less apt we are to actually solve these problems. And so you end up where we are now. Do you know what our national debt is right now? The last time I came here and spoke, which I think was a year ago, our federal debt was 23 trillion, maybe 24. It's now 28. And if any of you are here next year, and if you all are kind enough to invite me back, I guarantee you it'll be 32. These debts, the massive federal debt we have, comes along because of our belief in magic. all we have to do is elect these people, and they'll do these wonderful things. And doing these wonderful things requires a tremendous amount of money, and the things don't work. And so what do? We elect them again, because now they've got the real plan, they have the magic figured out, and they spend even more money. And that goes on year after year after year after year. And if you want a beautiful example of this, I give you the federal government's welfare program. We have, in this country, 100 federal programs aimed at helping the poor. I don't mean we tried 100 different things. I mean right now, coincidentally, that is altogether, we have 100 existing simultaneously programs designed to help the poor. Everything from income assistance to healthcare assistance to energy assistance to housing assistance, goes on and on and on. All sorts of things we do to help the poor. We've been doing this since 1967. Our poverty rate currently is about 13%. What was our poverty rate in 1967? It's about 13%. What has our poverty rate been pretty much every year since 1967? About 13%. In total, we have spent about $25 trillion fighting poverty. Now, politicians will say, yeah, but look, yeah, you spent $25 trillion fighting poverty and the poverty rate's only 13%, but my God, imagine what it would be if we hadn't spent that $25 trillion. We have 80% poverty. Well, hang on a second. What if we took that $25 trillion we spent over the past 40, 50 years, and instead of founding 100 poverty programs, instead we just cut checks to poor people? How many checks could we cut for $25 trillion? Well, it turns out, I've done the math. If we had taken that $25 trillion and simply given money to poor people in this country, we could have cut a check to every poor person, not every poor household, every poor person, man, woman, child. We could have cut a check to every poor person in the United States for $10,000 every year from 1967 to the present. That would have cost us the same $24 to $25 trillion. And what would it have achieved? It would have completely eliminated poverty. We could have spent the past 50 years in the only country in the history of Homo sapiens to have a 0% poverty rate. We could have eliminated poverty at the same time we eliminated polio. And yet we didn't. And why didn't we? Because of the political conundrum. Because if we had eliminated poverty, what would politicians run on? I mean, I can't say, elect me because you should care about poor people and I will make the lives of poor people better, because there wouldn't be any more poor people. And you notice this weird feedback mechanism that so long as we believe in the magic of government, politicians have an incentive to describe themselves as magical beings. Just elect them, they'll do this thing. And then the perverse part comes along, that the politicians actually thrive on the problem not going away. Because the minute the problem goes away, that's one less thing I have to campaign on. So long as the problem remains, I can say to you, look, I tried my hardest. The problem was the other party. They're obstructionists. Or the problem is, I wanted to spend this much money and the president only signed the bill for that much money, but elect me and I'll fight harder for you next time. And I can use this problem to get elected over and over again. So, what's the answer here? The answer is sitting right in front of us on a piece of paper. It's called the U.S. Constitution. Article 1, Section 8 lists 8 things the federal government is permitted to do. There are 8 things on the list, and that's it. The federal government's not allowed to do anything else. Article 1, Section 8 would have constrained the federal government. It would have prevented us from thinking about government as a magic wand, because a politician would come along and say, elect me and I'll make college free, to which the rest of us respond, no, you can't. That isn't a power that the Constitution grants you. But instead, we said, yeah, go ahead and do it. We ignored the constitutional constraints. We have been ignoring them since about the 1920s in this country. And little by little by little by little, the federal government has grown. It's grown way beyond its constitutional constraints, empowered by our belief in magic, a belief that itself would have been constrained if we had just stopped and taken a deep breath and said, wait a minute, this is not something the federal government can do. Now, I want to do a timeout here for a second, because I am not suggesting that the federal government, I am not suggesting that the government should have no role in doing things like caring for the poor, caring for the elderly or the sick or the indigent or whatever it is. I'm not saying the government shouldn't be doing that. I'm saying the federal government shouldn't be doing that. Article 1, Section 8 is a restriction on the federal government. If you want to do these things, go for it. But you got to do it at a state level or a local level. And one of the benefits of doing things at a state or a local level is that you bring the wonderful power of markets into the political sphere. What makes markets so wonderful is the fact that if you've got a store down the road that provides things that you want at prices you're willing to pay, you can go and you can buy stuff there. And your dollars support the store. And the minute that store stops providing what you want at prices you're willing to pay, what do? You walk away. You go to some other store. And now this store is left with two alternatives. One, start delivering what you want at prices you're willing to pay. Or two, go out of business and let the competitor do the job. Your ability to walk away is a magnificent force in the market arena that forces businesses to deliver to you things that you need at prices you're willing to pay. If we governed at a state level instead of a federal level, that same competitive power would exist amongst the states. So you got North Carolina, who does some things way better than Pennsylvania. And I look at this and I say, you know what? I've had it. The taxes are high in Pennsylvania and they're not giving me the very services I want. I'm moving to North Carolina. And I bring to bear on the state government in Pennsylvania the exact same forces you bring to bear when the store is no longer providing you the value that you want. You walk away. When we govern at a federal level, there's no way to walk away. Mr. Ziegler, when he introduced me, said I was supposed to talk about economics and what to expect from high school. So I'm going to stop haranguing you about economics, and I'll tell you some things that you can expect. Sorry, not high school. I said high school students. What to expect from college. How many of you have been told that the key to success is a college degree? How many of you have been told that a college degree is valuable? Yes. Now, I'm a college professor. I have been for a quarter of a century. And I'm here to tell you a college degree is not valuable, period. What is valuable, or could be valuable, is a college major. And how valuable it is depends on what major you're dealing with. I'll give you some numbers. Petroleum engineering currently is the highest paying major. If you have a 4-year degree, no master's, no PhD, just 4-year degree in petroleum engineering, you can expect to earn over the course of your life about $7 million. If it costs you $250,000 to go to college, which is probably on the high end, that's well worth it. $250,000 investment to bring back a $7 million return? Absolutely. Petroleum engineering is absolutely worth it. On the other end, child and family studies. Child and family studies, over the course of a career, you could expect to earn about $1.5 million. $250,000 investment in college education doesn't look so good at $1.5 million. In fact, it looks even worse when I tell you this next statistic. The average American with a high school diploma can expect to earn $2 million over the course of their career. In other words, there are some college majors that actually degrade your earning power. You would be better off just going and getting a job after your high school diploma than you would be going and getting a degree in child and family studies. And there's about a dozen college majors that are like that. They actually have a lower market value than what a high school diploma does. And then there are things that people tend not to talk about, the trades, right? Become a master electrician, a master plumber, a master welder. The trades are worth, of course it varies, but in general, the trades are worth more than about half of the college degrees. And they don't cost you nearly what it costs to get a college degree. So as you think about college, stop thinking in terms of college being valuable. Start thinking in terms of college majors being valuable. Now, some of you right now are being very sad because some of you are thinking to yourself, but I love working with children. I want a child and family studies degree. What I'm talking about here are the financial returns. There are other returns to an education beyond simply the financial stuff. There's job satisfaction, right? If your joy in life is raising children and dealing with them, teaching them to tie their shoes and teaching their letters and whatever it is that you do, right? If you love doing that and you go to college and you study petroleum engineering, two things will happen to you. One, you will be immensely rich. Two, you will be immensely sad. You will spend your life bemoaning the fact that you're stuck in a job that you hate. If, on the other hand, you study child and family studies, two things will happen to you. One, you'll likely be poorer than you would be if you'd just gotten a job somewhere else, but you will be happy. And go back to where I started this whole conversation. Stop thinking about dollars. Think about goods and services, and in this example, think about experience. You're human beings, and what you're looking to maximize is your life happiness, some of which does indeed come from the dollars you earn, the things that you can buy with it, but some of it also comes from your state in life. Are you living somewhere that you enjoy the community? Are you doing things that you're so excited to get up in the morning and go and do? So as you think about college, I'm not suggesting that everybody should major in science, technology, engineering, mathematics. I am suggesting that as you make these decisions, do so with open eyes and understand that there's a trade-off. There are pluses and minuses to various choices you might make. We tend to focus only on the pluses. Those of you who think about petroleum engineering, you're thinking about the dollars, aren't you? Petroleum engineers have a horrible life. You have to go and you spend 6-8 months away from your family on an oil derrick doing hard work that's dirty and grimy and is dangerous, but you make lots of money. Those of you thinking about child and family studies, it's wonderful. Children are the best things ever. You will be so happy. But there's a downside. The downside is you're going to have, trouble paying for your Netflix subscription, right? Understand there are pluses and minuses to every decision you make. What's important as human beings who come together in a shared community where we contribute to each other in a market environment, what's important is that you are aware of the pluses and the minuses of every decision you make. And that's all I have. Thank you for having me. Thank you for sitting here, those of you in the hot sun, and those of you not. We have a couple of minutes. I could probably take a question if you have a particularly pressing one. I know one of you has a question and you're afraid to ask it because you think everyone else is going to get mad at you for holding them out here. Go ahead. You're going to be really loud.
So is it possible to share your work with other people? Is it possible to share your work with other people?
My works particularly?
Yeah.
Yeah. I have a YouTube channel, Anthony Davies. I have a podcast, Words and Numbers. So there's lots of stuff. If you go to my YouTube channel, I've got like 200 videos on economics and public policy and stuff. So, go there, share it around. Words and Numbers. Check it out. It's really good. We come out with weekly episodes that are a half hour long. We talk about stuff like we're talking about here, right? So it's half an hour. You can listen to it as you're on your bus on the way to school or whatever it is.
When you were here in March of last year, you talked about double majoring, that if you had a passion for a low-earning degree.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, so let me quickly talk about double majoring, because a double major is a way to get around this problem I described to you of the pluses and the minuses. And I'll give you my sister as an example. My sister's love is theater and dance. And theater and dance is one of these majors that, it's like the NBA. If you're really good and you make it to Hollywood, you can make tens of millions of dollars, but 99% of you are going to be destitute. And that's the major that she picked. Well, she took a double major, theater and dance, and business. Now, taking that double major, she wasn't interested in business. Her love was theater and dance. But in taking the double major, two things happened. One is it gave her some safety, that if she couldn't support herself with her theater and dance major, then she was at least trained in business. She could go get a job that she might not like, but at least it'll pay the bills. So that's one thing it did. It also did something else. It opened the door to her to jobs that neither one of those degrees separately would have opened. So she ended up for a while as managing director of a ballet company. Now, as managing director of a ballet company, you need to be trained in two things. One is theater and dance, the other is business. And it turns out there are vanishingly small numbers of people who can do both those things well. And so when a job like that opens up, she's a top candidate because she studied both of these things. Opportunities that she would not have had with only one of those degrees, she does have with both of them. So if you're thinking about majoring in something on the low end of the scale, try and pair it with something that you may not love, but you can at least tolerate on the high end of the scale. At worst, you've got something to fall back on. At best, you'll find that you create a synergy that opens doors that wouldn't have been opened otherwise. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much. Well, thank you, Dr. Davies, for returning to Pinnacle Classical Academy. And teachers, you may take your students back to fourth period. Thank you again. Thanks so much. Thank you.